What I can say in interacting with pigs is that they are highly intelligent. And it was far more difficult to potty train a dog than a pig.
No, that's the whole point of this video today.
Okay. We are so accustomed to not necessarily think about the animals in the factory farms, and that's intentional.
Well, there are companies that sort of give consumers the impression that their products come from animals that are, treated idyllically.
Modern American markets are able to offer pork products with confidence.
That's often not the case, but the reason the companies are doing it is because they know consumers want humane products. People do not want animals to suffer.
Let's go back a few years.
Soon, California voters will cast their vote on Proposition 12, which would increase space for egg-laying hens, breeding pigs, and veal calves.
What is Proposition 12? This 2018 California ballot measure, which an overwhelming number of voters said yes to, basically asked the question,
do pigs even deserve the right to turn around? And American voters have consistently said yes.
Through legislation and ballot initiatives in a number of states across the U.S. On its face, I realize this is a ridiculous question we're asking.
What?
That most well-meaning people would never say no to.
But this is a story about an industry that continues to say no, taking their fight all the way to the United States Congress and Supreme Court. More on that in a bit.
So going back, Prop 12 passed in 2018.
What is this law specifically asking for?
Every pork, veal, and egg product that's sold in the state of California has to come from animals that were not subject to extreme forms of confinement.
The modern trends in swine production.
That's so cruel that they can't stand up, turn around, spread their limbs.
With pigs, the law mandates 24 square feet per animal, which would effectively prohibit the use of gestation crates. Crates used to house pregnant sows, which are barely larger than the size of their body.
We always knew that those measures would probably be subject to challenge by industry.
The pork industry.
Most of this complaint is coming from the National Pork Producers Council of all the industries affected by this law. What is pork's beef with it?
California will have say in every state in the country on how pigs are to be raised, which we as producers don't feel that's right.
They don't want to lose access to the California market.
The state with the #1 ag economy by far in the nation.
The latest stats continue to say it's the 5th largest economy in the world.
In doing business with California, producers can choose to comply with this law or abandon the market. What are the broader implications of a shift like this?
This will, without a doubt, impact what's going on globally from a supply chain.
With an economy that big, California's decisions can have an effect on how the rest of the world operates. The pork industry is a global industry. Even a large portion of it is owned by a Chinese entity.
The Chinese company bought America's largest pork producer.
Within this multi-billion-dollar industry, some producers have been willing to comply with this law. Others clearly have objections to the broad financial implications of allowing pigs a bit more space.
All our expenses.
Their objection really comes down to maximizing profits.
The payoff in the hog business.
Generate products the cheapest way possible. And a lot of times, the cheapest way of making a product also is the cruelest.
Feeling it? There we go. You got it, sir. You got it. There we go. Knowing how intelligent they are and how it's driving them mad to be in those cages where they cannot move their entire lives. It's inhumane, and it should not even be a process that happens in factory farming any longer.
The National Pork Producers Council has tried numerous times to repeal Prop 12 in U.S. courts. After a number of failures, they take their case to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Suing the California Department of Food and Agriculture, led by Karen Ross at the time.
It is a law that passed by a very popular vote, and our job is to implement it.
Hence the case name, National Pork Producers Council v. Ross, which Ralph and our team of lawyers defended.
Pork must meet the competition.
So the pork industry is arguing that the law somehow violates the Constitution, but what they're really arguing for is a right to sell cruel and inhumane products into California, even when California consumers have decided they don't want them.
The Pork Producers Council came with an argument that California was effectively regulating outside its borders. States are not allowed to regulate conduct in other states.
You'll hear argument first this morning, National Pork Producers versus Ross. Mr. Bishop.
Proposition 12 violates the Commerce Clause because it's an extraterritorial regulation.
What's the matter?
Proposition 12 is only regulating conduct within California's borders. The Pork Council's argument, though, was that upstream producers are going to have to make certain decisions as a result.
Upstream effects on other pork producers in other states.
And that should be deemed unconstitutional.
Does it matter whether or not you focus on the upstream effects?
The supply chain upstream.
California has an interest in banning immoral products from its own markets.
What is the concern with that?
Well, what are you getting at?
How much influence a state can have without inviting trade wars becomes an issue.
You know, we live in a divided country. Do we want to live in a world where Texas is at war with California and California at war with Texas?
And so sometimes it can feel like the animal welfare involved gets a little lost.
How do we tend to all these issues with concerns such as trade wars at hand? You need a lot more opinions to consider in this.
A wide array of interests gave their input in this case, in the form of briefs or opinions on record.
Some of the briefs included
Small Farmers Brief, the brief by conservative thought leaders,
Fellow Republican delegate,
a brief from the egg industry filed on our behalf.
The egg industry filed a brief basically saying, we're good with Prop 12.
That's really unique for the fact that Prop 12 actually regulates the egg industry in the exact same way.
You know, the egg industry, producers are ripping out battery cages. Over 40% of egg-laying hens are now cage-free.
Versus what it was over 10 years ago, under 10%.
And we're continuing to see that trajectory move up.
So if the egg industry can make that shift, what makes pork so different?
The Pork Council said the pork industry is different than other industries. We're so highly consolidated, highly monopolistic, that it will be impossible for us to segregate pork heading to California from pork that is sort of conventional.
Well, I suppose I hadn't really thought much about how food is distributed.
Most people don't.
So in other words, pork is saying, we can't do two types of supply lines, one for California consumers, one for the rest of the states. We produce pigs in tiny crates, that's it, one size fits all. Was their argument true?
The Pork Council was legally wrong. Some of its member companies, like Hormel and Tyson, were busy telling their shareholders that the companies were perfectly capable of complying with Proposition 12, and the shareholders were able to make profits off of both markets.
So the Pork Council basically says to the Supreme Court, we can't possibly run two supply lines.
That's right.
Then they say to their shareholders, we can run two supply lines.
Pig-headed.
The Supreme Court didn't take their argument, though. Why?
It was mentioned in the court's opinion that the sort of pork industry's own economists filed a brief on behalf of neither party saying you just can't credit the allegations that the Pork Council's making with respect to the financial impacts of Proposition 12.
On top of all the amicus briefs filed, one was from the economists who are working for the pork industry. And they're saying this is not going to have the financial impact on your industry that you're claiming it is. So, how did the Supreme Court rule in the end?
What they ruled on was more maybe of a states' rights issue.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but yeah.
The Supreme Court of the United States upheld Proposition 12.
In regard to two commerce claims, one with a 5-4 vote, the other a unanimous 9-0 vote.
The Supreme Court ended up saying that one of the reasons why the dismissal of this case is because the nature of the state interests were moralistic.
California's moral concerns and their views about complicity in animal cruelty.
The Supreme Court had a distinction between pigs and other products.
You know, if a state was going to try to regulate conduct within its borders that relates to interstate travel on trains or trucks, you could see where it might be a problem if each state had a different standard. The Supreme Court said pigs are not trucks or trains. We were given these statutes that have a quote from the court opinion. Pigs and products from sentient animals that can suffer are not like other products.
Just like us, they like little massages too.
We generally win hearts and minds with the public. You know, our issue is not a red state issue or a blue state issue. With respect to how animals should be treated and whether they just have the basic right to turn around, we're happy, you know, to litigate that because, you know, animals will win at the end of the day.
Depending on when you're watching this video, the Pork Producers Council is likely still trying to repeal Prop 12, currently attacking it within Congress's Farm Bill under the EATS Act, or the End Agricultural Trade Suppression Act as they're calling it.
But regardless of where the fate of that law is, something's been open that can't be closed here. Voters have overwhelmingly said that they think farm animals deserve the basic right to turn around. Here at Humane World for Animals, we're going to keep fighting for that right.